There's a lot to learn if you're just starting in Transport Fever 2, and not all of it is obvious. With this series, I hope to simplify down a lot of the concepts you'll be using in order to help you make the coolest and most efficient transport network possible. So I'm actually in this game, but even before we get into the game, there's just a couple menu settings that are important before we even start this, so I'm just going to briefly go over those, and then we'll jump into the actual game. Alright, so we're in the main menu here for free game, and you can do the campaign. I've played through a couple of them, but I had the problem where I would get really attached to my cargo network that I built up, and then I'd beat the mission and I'd have to leave it behind and I'd get very sad. So free game for me is really where Transport Fever 2 shines. And then as for the settings here, there's nothing too crazy. They should all be pretty self-evident. I'd recommend starting on probably like a small or medium. I personally started on large and I was fine, but whichever one of these, all the principles are going to be basically the same. Now there are a couple important options on the next page over here I want to go over, and the biggest one for me is going over to this settings and then heading over to this advanced settings up here. And then I would highly recommend, unless you're going for like an ultra themed playthrough, I'd highly recommend setting the vehicles thing here to all. And that's just going to give you a little bit more variety and kind of stuff to play with. And again, if you still decide you want to do a theme playthrough with like European vehicles or something down the road, you can always just buy the European vehicles. So I'd really recommend, if you're just starting, to start with this all. Again, it's just going to give you some more variety and options down the road. The next option I'd highly recommend before you actually start a game is to get this natural town growth mod. And this is basically going to make it so that wherever you actually deliver resources is where the town is actually going to grow. And it's also going to make it so that it can grow beyond what it is by default in the game. And this just makes so much sense. I honestly think this should be just integrated into the game itself. That's how good it is. A couple other quality of life ones that are optional but should help is this one, better RCI colors. It's just going to make some of the menus a little bit more clearly defined on what industry is what. This achievements with mods thing is cool because it lets you get achievements while using mods. And then the last kind of quality of life one I'd recommend is this different cargo icons. Usually a cargo station and a passenger station both have this same shade of blue, and this mod just makes the cargo ones a different color. It just makes it a little bit easier to distinguish. But if you're going to get any mod, again, I would highly recommend this natural town growth mod. It just really is that good. With that in mind, the last sort of setting I would recommend is to turn off this industry closure, because that's just going to add another layer of difficulty that you really don't need to worry about. Honestly, I don't really ever play with this on just because I like my industries just to always be working. And then of course you can start in whatever time you want, and that's about it. Okay, so we just started the game, and when you load in, you're probably going to get something that looks a little bit like this. And basically, the goal here in free game is just to, it's kind of vague, it's just, hey, make a transport network. And, okay, cool. How do I do that? So let's look first at industries and cargo industries. I definitely recommend starting with cargo lines as opposed to passenger lines, because passengers are kind of finicky. They'll take the fastest mode of transport, whatever it is. So if you have a bus going between the towns and you have a train going between the towns, they're only going to take one of those, and then your other line won't have any people in it because there's a faster way to go. And then a little bit later on in the game, when personal vehicles become a thing, if personal vehicles are faster than either a bus or a train or a ship or whatever, then the passengers will lean toward the personal vehicles, and it's just a little bit more finicky than the cargo. The cargo is very standard. If you build a route from an industry to a refinery to a city, it's always just going to produce those goods, so it's just an easy place to start with. Now, what do I mean by if you build a line from an industry to a refinery to a city? Well, if we look around the map, we can see all these cool little icons here, right? This is wood, this is iron, this is wheat or a farm. And basically, all of these icons with just one little thing on them is going to be the very start of a production line. And what I mean by that is, if we look over here, let's take this logging for an example, right? So we have this log icon above this industry, and when you click it, you'll get some menus, and then one of these menus will be a consumer. And then if you click this little icon here it'll jump over to whatever industry consumes that good. And basically, by consuming a good, it actually means refining the good. So if you see here, these two are right next to each other, so it's really convenient. This is just one icon, and it's a log. This industry down here, that again, you can just look for them across the map, or you can find whatever industry and come over to this consumers and then find them that way. And click, again, this button right here. This industry down here has two icons on it. And if you see in the middle of it, there's a little arrow. It's kind of like a greater than sign, but it really just means taking first resource, creating next resource. So this industry right here will take logs and it's going to turn them into refined wood, I think is what it's called. If we hover over this, it should say planks. And then now, if I click on this industry, you see there's actually two tabs here. There's going to be a suppliers and a consumers. Whereas this one, with just one icon on it, these will only have consumers because they're the very start of a production line. Any refinery, I guess, I don't know if that's technically the right term because I don't know if you refine wood, but that's just what I'm going to call it. Anything with two or more resources is going to have both suppliers and consumers, so two of them. Suppliers is where it's getting this raw resource, and then it'll make it into a refined good. And then if we come over here to consumers, and I click one of these, now we can see it's a similar thing here. So this is a more advanced factory. This takes refined wood or planks and it turns it into another product. And then this here too, this is going to be again the third part of it. The first part is a wood. The second part of it is turning wood into planks. And then if I come over here and I go to consumers, let's see where this one is. This one's a little bit closer. So we have wood going into planks, and then we have planks going into machines. And then if I click on this factory, now the consumer is just going to be a city itself. So that's kind of how the cargo works. It's really easy to see what's what by clicking on the industry, and then you can find both what consumes it, and if it's a more advanced factory, you can see what supplies it by clicking on this little icon here. Real quick, I just want to mention that the more advanced factories, like this one over here, sometimes require two goods to create. So this machines factory right here, if we click on it, you can see the overview. You can see right here this rule. It takes planks and it takes steel, and then again you get this little arrow thing, which means it produces machines. So this is going to take a little bit of setup to get actually working. It's harder than just connecting a raw resource to a refined good. To get this machines factory working, we're going to have to get these planks being created. We're going to have to get the planks delivered over here. And then it's actually not going to start producing machines until it has both of these two icons. So if you don't know where to get steel from, again, it's really easy. You just go to the suppliers tab and then it'll show you exactly what's what. So we already have the planks covered with the Abington sawmill, and now we need to get the other half of this equation covered. So we can either go to the Leek steel mill or the Abington steel mill, and depending on which one is closer and more convenient, I think for our case this one is right next door to this thing we already have going, then we can get this one set up from here again. But again, if we zoom into this steel mill, it's going to take these two resources here. Looks like it's going to take 2 iron and 2 coal to make 1 steel. And again, this one is pretty simple. It looks like there's a couple industries right next door, but if you're on a bigger map and you can't find them, it's very easy just to go to the suppliers tab, and then you can just click around and see which one is closest and most convenient to you. So to get the machine factory working, we're going to need to get this factory working, which requires logs, and we're going to need to get the steel mill working, which would require these 2 resources. And then again, the machines are going to be consumed by the cities themselves, which you can see right next to the city name. Looks like this city is demanding machines and consumer goods. So I'd really like to keep these videos on the shorter end to make them a bit more approachable. So instead of getting all of this connected right now, let's just start with a very basic just 1-2 line here, and then that'll be it for this episode. So even though I think most of us are playing this game for the trains, let's be real, trains are very cool. Trains take a lot of initial setup because tracks cost a lot of money, and if you don't know what you're doing, they have a very high maintenance cost, so you would lose a ton of money if you just built it on one simple route like this, and I'd highly recommend starting instead with trucks. It's very hard to lose money with trucks. They basically, unless you're playing on like very hard difficulty, they're always going to make a little bit of money. They're probably not going to be your main money makers. The main money maker is going to be delivering the higher quality goods to where they want to go, but they're at least going to make you a little bit of money and get things going. So I'd highly recommend starting with trucks as opposed to trains, and then once you have a kind of good constant income, then you can move on to trains. But for now, let's just grab a truck station, and then we could probably leave it on the defaults here. If you're trying to save money, one platform on the left, one platform on the right, and 10 meters should be just fine. And all we're going to do here is you're going to place it close enough so that the industry lights up. And the farther away I move it, this one is actually pretty far, you can see that just about till here is where the industry lights up, and that means it's going to be connected to the industry. So it really doesn't matter too much where you place these. A lot of people will try to place them as close to the final destination as possible because it reduces the distance that the trucks have to travel. But it actually doesn't really matter because the amount of money you get is calculated based on how far away the stations are from each other. So if I place it over here, I'm going to make a little bit more money than if I place it closer to the final destination. But honestly, guys, don't think about this too much. Trucks are always going to make just a little bit of money. Your primary money makers are going to come a little bit later on with the big trains and train stops. So just place this wherever it's cheapest, really. And I think that's going to be around... probably somewhere like that is about as cheap as it's going to get for us. And we'll know we did this right if you come into the station and the industry lights up. If you click on the station and the industry does not light up, you have a problem and you need to place the station closer, or it could be that the road itself got deleted somehow. So if you're ever wondering, just click the station and the industry should light up. Now, all we need to get a route going is to place a station at the other end of the line, and in our case, it's very convenient. We have a road already made for us, and it's pretty close by, so just go ahead and grab another station, and then again, it really doesn't matter where it goes too much, just find a cheap place for it. Looks like this one's going to be a little bit more expensive, but something like this should be pretty good for us. And then to make a line, it's very easy. You come down here to this button right here, the line manager, and then you're going to click on the new line, and then you're going to connect the stations. Brief tip here, make sure these stations are the same type of vehicle. So if you try to connect a truck station to a train station or a port, you're going to get an error. So make sure the little icon here is a truck station to a truck station, and you should be good to go. Another tip I mentioned in my tips and tricks video is to basically always have the alternate platform things turned on. And again, I'm not really sure why this isn't default in the game, but right now it's making it so that the trucks will only use this one platform over here, and you're basically always going to want it to use both. And we're going to do that for both these stations. So this other one over there, we're going to do the same thing. Just go ahead and turn into alternate platform and select both. And this is just going to make it so that if you have a bunch of trucks on one line, if one of them is actively unloading or loading, the other truck can use the other platform. Again, I'm not sure why this isn't default. I pretty much always do this all the time. The last thing we need to do here is actually put some vehicles on it, and to do that, we're going to come in, since I have truck stations, we're going to come into this road category and buy a road depot. And it really doesn't matter too much where you place this, but generally if you know you're going to be buying vehicles for other parts of the map, like over here as well, might be good to place it somewhat centrally. So maybe somewhere over there is a better place for it than putting it way over here, because if we use this to buy other vehicles for these lines, they won't have to travel as far. So let's go ahead and buy some vehicles now, and I do have a couple other tips here. I'm going to go to the cargo tab just to narrow down to what I want, and as you scroll through, there's going to be a bunch of options, and again, this is because I chose the all vehicles option. If you're playing with just a thematic European or American, for instance, it's going to be a lot lower, but it's kind of fun to have this variety. And the big things to look for here are the types of cargo you want to carry. So a lot of the covered ones will say all cargo, but they'll have slightly less capacity than the cargo specific types. So generally, if you know you're only going to be carrying logs, it's better to go for these specific cargo types because the capacity right here is going to be, it looks like this is just one higher, but sometimes it's a difference between like 25 and like 30 later on in the game. So you're generally going to want to do these specific ones. And then I typically just start with one to get the line going because the industry is not going to start producing until a truck is actually on the line and the goods are being delivered. So once I toggle this truck, which if you missed that, by the way, all I did was click on this road depot. The vehicles are just going to hang out in whatever depot you bought them from until you set them on a line. I come in here, I'm going to select the vehicle, and then I'm going to go over here to this set line. And then it's very easy right now because we only have one. And I put him there, and I actually have the game on pause at the moment, which if you come down here, you can play, you can go into a little bit faster time to speed up the simulation, or if I press the space bar, that will pause and unpause too, the space bar. And immediately, you can already see that now the truck is on the line. We know we set up the route correctly because we have a little wood icon above this station right here, and we can see if we click on the industry itself and you look at the shipment is going up. That means it's starting to ship goods around the map. And if we go to the consumers, we can see instead of 0, we can see it going up for the Abington sawmill. Hooray, we set up our first line, and hopefully you understand why it works. Join me in the next episode where we'll probably get into trains, or check out my Island Hopper series where I do all of this from scratch in real time on a megalomaniac-sized island map.